I'm just going to take it off mute there for a second for folks on the line there. We'll be starting here shortly.
A little confusing.
Whenever you're ready.
Go to beer.
You too.
Yeah, looks good. Already loaded shells. I like to have that on my grind. Ernie, you ready for crabbing?
Good, Tommy. How you doing?
I believe that's right.
You don't overdo it. You gotta listen to your doctor, that's for sure.
Went to Richmond this session?
The first year.
Those crabs on your ties there, I like that. And oyster. Oh man, you just need a rockfish and you'll be good to go. Yeah.
Just tell me when you're ready.
I think if there's any more joining us, I was expecting, I think, Dan to come on and maybe Jackie Shannon, but I'm not.
I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I didn't
that's
see you
all
there
right.
for a
I'm
second. You blended in.
She's
Good
going
job.
on.
Switched hands, right?
Didn't see you. Okay, there you go. I think then, other than Dan joining, I think we're.
Well,
You
by
might
the
come
time we get done the introductions and everything, and he should be on maybe.
Nice.
So you ready to get started?
If, ready when you are. yeah.
All right, let's get the January 24th SMAC meeting started here. I'd like to thank all the members for being here. Thank the attendants in the audience for being here, and we hope to hear from you guys. Before we get started, I would like to start from my left here to my right and get the names of the ones that are here.
Tommy Kellum, Weems, Virginia.
Jackie Shannon, Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Ben Johnson, Suffolk, Virginia.
Richard Harding, Reedville, Virginia. Wayne France, Northern Neck, Virginia.
J.C. Hudgens, Virginia Watermen's Association.
Ernie George, Whitestone, Virginia.
Don Porter, Saxes.
Peyton Mason, Gloucester.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have anybody on the phone, right?
I don't believe so. We do have Melissa Southworth of VIMS if there's any questions for her, but we do have two callers now. We unmute them and see.
Dan Dowling, Tangier.
Thank you, Dan.
Cody Metcalf, Eastern Shore.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, we have the introductions done, and we did some work on with the oyster business this morning. I think that those of you that weren't here, I would like to get Andrew kind of to give us an overview of what happened this morning. So that will help us in our further discussions and actions that we want to take this afternoon.
Sure. So the commission met today, and there was a public comment period. And during that public comment period, a petition was delivered to the commission, and Mr. Emery Rice delivered that petition and spoke, requesting a extension to a number of areas for the public oyster harvest season. And requested that the commission take emergency action to pass those changes. There was a motion that the commission did approve and did pass to amend regulation by emergency today to extend two areas that were set to close in either the end of this month or in February. Those areas which were extended by emergency regulation at today's commission meeting were the James River hand scrape areas. They were extended to close on February 24th from a scheduled closing date of February 14th, so a 10-day extension there. And Area 2, the hand scrape area that's currently set to close at the end of this month was extended to February 24th as well. There was some discussion on probably a lot of other topics that may come up today, but the commission chose to table those until a scheduled public hearing in February, and after this committee has discussed any season extensions, which I'm assuming we'd like to put on the agenda for today's meeting.
What was the last one, Andrew?
The two areas that were extended today was Rappahannock Area 2
Okay,
and just the James River Hand Scrape areas 1, 2, and 3, both closing on the 24th.
okay.
And if I'm correct, Andrew, because of the odd date of February 24th, that's because the 30 days starts today.
There's a little bit, there can be a later effective date, but that was what the commission voted on the 24th. 30 days, if it is effective immediately, would have made it actually the 22nd, but that is effective the 26th and goes to the 24th. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what's on, I don't have an agenda or know what's on your agenda, but if you have anything, you can proceed.
Yep. No, I was going to actually see, I don't have really a set agenda. This is mostly a commission meeting that you all requested. I think sort of the agenda in general is to talk about oyster harvest season extensions. We'd agreed to have this meeting prior to the February commission meeting. So I'd like to discuss that. Also, I'd like to give you a brief division update and introduce to you, if we could take that first, to Adam Kenyon. He'll be starting tomorrow as the official chief of the Shellfish Management Division. He's been with the agency for 12 years, most recently in his role as Deputy Chief of Fisheries. Prior to that, he worked for 7 years in North Carolina Fisheries and has a Bachelor's of Science in Natural Resource Management from the University of Rhode Island. Right?
That's a good memory.
There we go. All right.
So I'll be starting tomorrow, so it'll be short term, long run, long term. I think it'll be a really good thing. So I'm happy to have someone like Andrew here, as well as a lot of people from the surveying to really get me off the ground. So a lot of you have already worked with over the years, so hopefully it'll just be a smooth transition.
Well, I know you've always exceeded in the different positions that you've had, and we're glad to have you.
Appreciate that.
Welcome.
And if there's any specific items that we want to add to the agenda now, I'd be glad to try to address them. And I would like to have another SMAC meeting in February, primarily to discuss the replenishment program this year prior to that February commission meeting. So we don't have to take that now, but
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, J.C.
I got a couple of things, Andrew. I'd like to just put it out there right now, and we'll hopefully get to discuss it here. I would like to get you to go over the oyster user fee transfer requirements. There's still a lot of confusion out there on that because, what was essentially passed was definitely different than what SMAC had recommended. So mainly the military and the medical and the family transfers. The other stuff was pretty okay with that. So I'd like to get you to do that for us so everyone on the board is aware of that. And I do have another discussion on the patent-on rig on single license versus double license. I would like to put that up for discussion also sometime here today if we could.
Okay, thank you.
At the tail end of the meeting, I'd like to give a brief update on the fishery improvement project for oysters and just one small request that they've made.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that has something that they would like to bring up about the maybe extensions or opening or closing any area?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, ma'am.
I did not hear about the commission meeting today until just now. What was the reason for the petition for the extension?
The reason was, I guess, the reason the commission, it was an emergency regulation which can only be adopted to protect, in this case, the oyster industry. So seafood industry was the reasoning, and also to alleviate pressure on some harvest areas was the reasons that were given to the commission for the extension by the petitioners.
Okay, thank you.
France might have more comments on that. but-
Yeah. Area 4 is due to open again the 1st of February. Area 2 is supposed to close, but Area 2 has an abundance still of oysters. Area 4 does, so we wanted to take some pressure off of Area 4 by leaving Area 2 open.
And just a note, Jackie, a lot of boats came up from the James River to work the Rappahannock in Area 7, Area 8, so it was minimal participation down there in that fishery in that area down there, so I think that was the main reason. It's just been a very, very low boat count down there. So I think that's one reason why we pushed it.
Thank you both.
Mr. Callum?
Mr. Chairman, I, after, on the way down here, listened to the commission meeting and the recommendations and Andrew's comments, and I just, to get us started, I heard Andrew's suggestion of 10 days added to each season, which we've taken James River and Area 2 off the table with that, but I'd just like to comment the Area 7 and 8 that JC spoke of. I agree with the management that we've had of opening that each year, and I'm not sure if that was on the table for an extension, but I'd like to see Area 8 close like it's supposed to and keep us in line for next year for Area 7 and Area 8 open, and should it be the will of the commission, I think that is working well. And when I left this morning, all the boats were in with their limit of beautiful oysters, and I think we're on a good track there.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Area 7 and 8 have a good future for next year, you know, if everything goes as according to plan. So, you know, we hope that's the way things work.
I would like to throw out, this is asking for a little bit more, but just bear with me on, the commission would have the ability, if we approved it today, to add the 2 days on Area 2, which would be that Monday and Tuesday as it's slated. I believe it would close on a Friday.
The commission meeting is the 28th of February.
It's the 28th. I guess you'd only pick up one day. Where I was going with that, I would have liked to see if it's possible that Area 2 stay open for the entire month, picking up that extra 2 days, and we cut off of Area 4. You know, the time that everyone would think was prudent, but I do think Area 4 is probably needs a rest, and it would make more sense now that we have James River and Area 2 to work from, maybe to take some off of 4 and preserve that for.
You know, I was thinking maybe Andrew and his staff could look at Area 4 and see how many boats are just going to be working there for the first couple of weeks, and then go from there. I mean, if it's not many boats there and they're catching the limit, then I don't have a problem with it remaining open until the 24th. But you know, if there's a bunch of boats working there and we're doing damage to the bar, then the Commissioner Green has the authority to shut it down.
Well, if that's the case, that the commissioner can do that, you know, based on, I'm fine with that, but I just would like some oversight on Area 4 going forward with the action that was taken today with 2 and James
That makes
River.
sense, Andrew?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think what Tommy's talking about there is I don't know that SMAC at this point can modify what the commission passed today for the month of February. That they voted on the 24th by emergency regulation. There was a little bit of confusion on the emergency regulation, I think, there, but that 24th date was in the motion.
What I'm envisioning is going to public hearing with the last 2 days. So it
The
wouldn't be-
commission doesn't meet until to the end of February, though. It's actually the commission, the 20.
That's the Tuesday, that's the last day, so,
Last day.
okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
So I think you're losing 2 days, I think,
Right,
is what
right.
it is, so.
Wayne, so Andrew, what would be the actual dates on Area 2? Review that again for me, in February?
It would close on Friday, the 24th,
Okay, all right,
is what the commission approved today.
okay, great.
I would like to hear on the 10 days that we could extend. We talked about, listened to, it seems like you talked about Great Wacomica at the commission and
We did.
Deep Rock and these other areas. I'd like to hear from the watermen whether they would like to consider an extension that would pick up those 2 days, or whether we'd want to take 2 days off and start March 1st. You know, I hate for anybody to lose 2 days' work, so I would, I'd like to hear if we do some of that, how we would structure it, or whether we'd just take 2 days off.
Right. I think the main reason I think the commission was looking at a Great Wacomica for an extension is because Mr. Headley on the commission has been working there, and from what I understand, it's about 7 boats that have been working there the whole year, so that's an underused bar as far as I'm concerned.
We've got, I believe,
wouldn't
about
lose 2
4
days, 'cause
boats
Patton
working
won't be
there, and they're in by, the buyer brings the oysters to us, and typically he's there by 9:30, 9:45 from Reedville, so they're, whatever's there, they're catching them pretty quickly.
Right,
I
right.
absolutely agree. Well, you got 4, I got 3, there's 7. So, I mean, it's just hasn't been worked much at all. I do have a question. Did y'all
Please.
mention Tangier at all?
I don't think did we talk about Tangier? I thought somebody did, but
I was gonna bring it up.
Very good.
somebody did bring something up about Tangier for an extension in March.
What
There-
happened?
Did you want to go ahead, Dan, or?
Well, I mean, I was just going to say sort of the same thing that all the areas, other areas have said. I'd like to, get an extension for the Tangier Pocomoke sign. I mean, if it's the Pocomoke's got most of the pressure, I don't know. That'd be 3 months of that. I wouldn't kick and scream if it opened, but I'm more concerned for us for the Tangier sign. It's really hardly even got touched this year.
Exactly.
I mean, I'd be open for any kind of extension for maybe a couple weeks till the 15th, something like that, whatever it is.
Dan, I think you could use a month, but I don't think that's probably in the cards, is it, Andrew?
Well,
About 3 weeks.
it sounds like there's I guess the concern is always that any more resource that you take now, and it is true that the oyster resource is in the best shape it's been in a long time. I think we've had some areas that have been standalone areas. If you extend one area too long, then that ends up with an area that's hanging out for 2 weeks. And depending on market conditions, if same number of boats stay there, 40 boats working it, that's fine. But if, crabbing hasn't started yet in late March, and everyone wants to go oystering and they're paying $65 a bushel, maybe that's wishful thinking, then that could pile in a lot of boats. But,
Well, I mean-
I don't know what the price is going to be. I doubt it's going to be that high, but it's
That's
one
what,
of those.
that's what,
Well, I'm looking at Tangier Seine has not hardly been touched.
Right, right.
I mean, I think Dan told me it was either 15 or 17 boats from Tangier, and the biggest part of them has been in the Pocomoke the whole time. I'm concerned what these oysters are going to look like 2 years from now. We're going to have a lot of dead ones,
Well,
possibly.
it's hard to predict what's going to live and what's going to die. And in terms of oysters, when there is a heavy strike, everyone's seen it. You get small, skinny. You get long, skinny oysters when there's a lot of spat. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't good market oysters mixed in there. It's just you have to spend a little bit more time going through them.
I mean, I'm to the point, if it's not been worked, and the industry needs the oysters, it would be a big help to the watermen. Everybody wants to take pressure off crabs. That'll be one way of doing it. But,
and you're gonna have people going fishing also during the month of March, and like you said, people will be getting ready for crabbing, but also, if you can spread the fleet out a little bit more, it helps everything a little bit.
I mean, the thing with Tangier Seine, we got a lot of small boats. You can open up Tangier Seine for 2 weeks in March. They may get a week. I mean, you got to look at the weather conditions over there and everything else. So, I mean, I know Dan said somebody crabbing opens up, and was it Cali, Dan?
Yeah, that's my only concern. I mean, Kylie, there's not really that many boats goes to Thur for crabbing. I mean, there's a few. I mean, well, there's a few at times, some years, but there's always some that goes to Kylie. That seems to be a pretty popular spot. And I mean, I wouldn't kick him if you opened it a month. I wouldn't kick and scream him. That's not what I'm saying. But that is a concern of mine. That could be a mess. That could, you know.
All right.
If you open that for the whole month, and that's where otters has got to get. I mean, these crabs in the spring when they're just wiggling out, if to, you know, it's not like you can go in on the hard bottom and catch crabs in there. It's and there's mud hills up on that upper end of Kylie, and that's where the crabs get. And if that's where they're roistering, that could be a mess. That could be a that could be some anger coming out in some people there.
Keeps the blood pressure going anyway. What about the Thurfa? Could that stand 3 weeks? Or
Are you asking me or
yeah,
Andrew?
I mean, you know how many boats
as far as from what I've heard, I've not made a lick to Thurfer. I mean, they're getting them out. What few's there, they're getting them early too. It's just taking them, you know, it's just a little more on them. And I think I can't answer. I mean, I think you could because it's not 7 boats has been the most that's been there right now. I think like today, I think it was 4. One of them's broke down, so it was 4 boats there today. And you know, Thurfer's a huge rock, and that whole upper end's not been touched. It's you know, the work's been done on the lower end, and that's huge. Do I think you could? Yeah, I think you could. Yeah, I really do.
3 weeks? Think it would be all right for 3?
I really don't know.
I'm talking to Dan's been there. Dan knows how many boats that work there.
Right.
And what I can understand, there's plenty of oysters there. I mean,
Well,
I just hate 2 years from now, we go down there and we've got a solid load of dead oysters that we could have harvested, made some money off of. That's my concern. I mean, you know, not everybody crabs early. But I mean,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm gonna ask a dumb question. When is the crab season slated to open this year?
15th.
15th?
Yeah.
17.
17th, is that what it is?
17th. Normally is.
That's a set date.
There was a ticket already.
Probably will go in a couple weeks.
17th, how many days would that give us?
Give you 12 working days.
17.
17th.
No, it'd be 4 less.
Give you 12 working days.
13, 14 days, 13.
13 days, as much as I hate 13, but I would accept it this time. Could you do that?
Just cutting it off before the 17th.
Take that. Well, I guess there's one thing that I don't want to commit to anything on a staff recommendation at this meeting today. There's a whole month of February. There could be 2 weeks of ice that comes in the last February. It might.
You know,
be
it
more
might.
warranted. So what I can commit to is I can say what I think would be a good idea holistically, but I don't want to commit to one area and then not look at the others. What I think is important to do is not have any areas that stand alone, and I have some ideas that I could share that I already shared at the commission meeting, and I'd be glad to share those now or wait to hear others and then tell what I say there towards the end.
We can make recommendations today on the things that we'd like to see possibly. But Andrew said that we will need another meeting before our February major meeting that we have, commission meeting. So we can hash over those things. Andrew can study them by then and get more information on them. And maybe we'd have time to work on all those things, the ideas that we have today then, if that's suitable to you guys.
Makes sense, and I would like to hear staff's proposal.
Well,
I think it would be better to go for 2 weeks, 10 days.
Well, those are things we can put on the table today and discuss a little bit, and then Andrew can look over
My
'em.
point is, I would like to get an extension of some kind for March because, you know, we could use it.
But what we need to know now here at this meeting, the commission did its job with the emergency thing today. That's going to help us a lot. But now we need to put forward the things that we want in March. And start to work them out here. And then at the next meeting before our commission meeting, we'll have a good plan to send to the commission with maybe Andrew's slight agreement and our full agreement.
Hopefully we can get more than that now.
Yeah, we agreed on a plan in August. I thought Andrew put forth a really sound information about the state of all the reefs. You know, we agreed on this season. We've had excellent weather recently. It sounds like, I mean, and I love the concern for the crabs, but, you know, it seems like we're pushing for an extension just because there's more oysters out there. And I think we're in a great place. It's great people are catching their limits early, maybe not putting as much effort, but just, you know, coming from where I'm coming from, sorry.
Understood.
You know, just have to also voice some concern because, you know, not that long ago, 2018, we had terrible weather.
We had
bad
the
stats
freshet.
and a huge die-off, and then really low reproductive efforts after that. It just isn't that far in the rear view, and so.
And that could happen next fall.
It could happen anytime.
Yep.
Yeah.
It happened in Nansemond River and James River this year. We lost probably half. And we can speculate about crabs, we can speculate about the weather, we can speculate about market price. All those speculations, one guarantee is sooner or later you're gonna go somewhere and they're gonna be dead.
Right,
That is a bigger constant than any of these other variables everybody's throwing out there to speculate around.
But I think what we're trying to take advantage of
stockpile.
here is we've had 3 or 4 areas that have been worked hard. And all the boats, or the majority of the boats, went to these areas. We had other areas open that hardly got worked at all. There's a good resource there that needs to be taken advantage of, and it hasn't been touched.
Could I say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to address something that the madam said a few minutes ago. I totally understand what you're saying, and I want you to, I hope you understand that, and Andrew knows this, I've talked to him enough. I'm not one that says everything needs to be open at all times. In previous SMAC committee meetings, I have voted no on extensions while we're getting our limit, but because of the way that I see how the bottom looks, it was taking us till 12:30, 1 o'clock to get our limit, and we were pulling up Dallin solid shell, cinder. The bottom was getting tore up. I voted no, and I pissed some people off on here for doing that. I don't think that it's taken lightly what damage can be done to an oyster rock. I don't think we're just here doing it to say, hey, they're there, we want them, and let's take them now because they should be ours. I don't think that's the attitude that this committee has done. Another thing on that is, before the season started, in the SMAC committee, before the season started, it was brought up. I think Mr. Mason brought it up about getting a bushel limit raise, and that was voted down on. That was turned down for the prospect of getting an extension later on in the year. If we got the bushel limit raised, the extensions were going to be pretty well off the table the way it sounded. And everybody, there was different opinions, but everybody agreed. Well, you know, it was a fight not worth making a big fuss over. So everybody said, all right, we'll take the 16, we'll take the 8 bushels, 16 2 people, so that we can maybe get an extension. And just going back on what I said before, I don't know, I'm sure somebody there remembers, some people wanted the extension on before the season started. And I said, I was one of the voices on this, and I said no. I said, because we don't know what the rocks look like. We don't even know if they're dead yet. There's no need to put 2 weeks on, and if it looks bad, that's 2 more weeks that it don't need dredging. So I don't think we're just asking for an extension just to be barbarians. I think we're asking for an extension. This is an exceptional year. Yes, 2018 was bad. There have been some bad times, but I think most everybody in this committee can say with an absolute that this is as good as it's been in my lifetime. I've been doing this since '99. I've never seen it look like this. There's as many little ones as there are big ones, and I don't think it's out of the realm that we get a 2-week extension. Thank you.
You know,
And also, we're not just asking for extensions here. We're asking to look at Area 4 if that looks poor, it's supposed to be open the whole month of February. Forgive me, I've had bronchitis. We're asking that it could be closed early.
And I appreciate that. I'm not insinuating that, there's any barbaric, mentality.
You're a barbarian, Dan, I heard it.
Since this was approved in August, there hasn't been many changes to the overall biomass. And
Not to interrupt you, but it was approved with the idea of having this very meeting, that if stock was good enough to
And I'm
sustain it,
asking for an extension
asking
on
for
it, and
what
you
we're
made no
asking.
pressure.
We were supposed to have this
Or if
meeting in
stock was
December.
We were supposed to do
Or
this
if
in
stock was
December.
bad, saying, we need to shut the door, it's over.
Right.
And so, here we are, obviously a month late, but
And for
with where we were when we passed what's in front of
And
us.
I commend the commission and the program for, there's been so many wonderful things that have been done. We're in the best place that we have been
We are.
because of this management, because of your direction. I don't mean to undermine how important that's been or how seriously you take the overall biomass. It's just, I'm here to just ask the questions about conservation,
that's
long-term
fine.
biomass. And,
Understood.
I'd love to hear staff recommendations too,
It's
and just take it on.
Understood, and we're lucky to be here tonight having this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank some of these watermen out here that showed up. Tommy, me talked, and you guys taking your time, especially Mr. Rice, excellent job speaking today. Taking your time, day off of work, coming out here, I commend you. There should be more of you like that, doing that. I really appreciate that. Also, the commission meeting today and how everything got worked out, I want to thank you how that worked out, and listen to the watermen and industry. So, we're talking about it this time. We've been fortunate. We've had a very good areas open, very good. And the industry market and the watermen have worked there and worked there pretty hard and still catch them fairly quick. But it has left other areas not being worked at all. And I have private shore as a rental oyster on private shore. If we leave it setting for a long amount of time, the product does not become very good quality. It, gets snappy. It's almost like farming. If you had a field and you didn't till it up every now and then, what do you have? It grows up with weeds.
Good topsoil.
Yeah.
As far as the extensions on the shore, we're asking for a rock that hadn't had any pressure at all this year. I mean, Dan's right there, he can tell you. I mean, we're asking for a 2-week extension for that, and I don't feel that's
I
bad.
agree, and I'm thinking Great Wacomico. I mean, I'm just gonna put the stuff I got on my mind out. Great Wacomico, extending that hadn't been worked. Deep Rock is something that hadn't been worked for years now. JC, how many boats are on Deep Rock? You work Deep Rock, don't you? How many on that?
3.
3?
3 boats, yep. Yeah,
That's pretty much been like that for years.
yeah. But if I could comment just a
been
minute,
always been down there for the years.
Jackie, on the James River, I think it was 12 boats in Deep Creek working James River. That side of the James River, I don't know how many was over on the Chuckatuck side
There are 46 boats there this morning.
this morning. Okay. Well, if you look at the stock assessment for the James River, areas 1, 2, and 3, and 2021 is the last statistics that I seen, we had an average market of about 14 market oysters per meter squared. So the resource is in good shape in those areas, and it's been very little effort, and that's a big area. It's a lot of acres, several hundred acres of ground. But if you take them all and average them out, that's what you come to, and that's according to them. So that was the main reason that we asked for the 2-week extension in James River.
All right, before we go on any further, you watermen out here have anything you'd like to add or say while you're here? Anybody out there have anything they'd like to add? Here, nobody. I'm sorry, I couldn't see who. Was there somebody with their hand up or anything?
Adam behind him.
Right here.
Adam?
Okay.
You
Did you wanna say something,
Say your
please?
name in the record there. That'd be good.
Just state your name for the record.
Ty Burns, I'm from the Eastern Shore. Dan pretty much touched on what I wanted to, but 4 years ago, Thoroughfare was so snipey and struck up, they didn't want them to work it, and it didn't get worked that hard, and here we are now. The last time it was open 2 years ago, how many boats worked it then, Dan? It wasn't many.
No, the last 2 weeks it got worked some. But it weren't, man. I mean, that was about it. The last 2 weeks out of the season, plus that was the year of COVID. It weren't what you call a great market year that year.
Yeah, we ran over there 2 weeks and worked the same buoy the whole time, but my point is, if that sits again for 2 more years, I'm just scared what they're gonna look like. I mean, I think it all could stand to be worked some. I just hope y'all will consider the extension for Tangier anyway.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you for that. I guess the best way to do this is I'm gonna start with Mr. Kellum, and we'll work our way right on down through here and discuss your wish list and maybe your not so wishful list.
If it's appropriate, Andrew said he had some ideas on what extensions could look like. I'd like to hear what,
All right, okay, we'll go with
like,
Ann.
start there with
We'll
where.
go first with the boss.
You're gonna put the target on me, huh? No, well, I think again that I guess a couple things to kind of go backwards is, we'll get forwards there in a minute, but some of these areas already had extensions beyond what was approved last year. So the James River is one of those areas that already had a longer season set when we set that season. The Patentong area 1 and Deep Rock already had an extra month and a half than they did last year in the season that is approved right now. Dan is correct that particularly Dan and Don were talking about not making those extensions on Tangier. They wanted to wait and see. So just to kind of correct some of the stuff that was said there, some of these areas extensions compared to last season were already approved, and some areas like Tangier and Pocomoke Sound, we kept that same 3-week season. So we did a little bit of a hybrid, and the commission approved that. In terms of season extensions, I think we've seen it. Fortunately, we're in a position where I think I don't really call it a problem, but any boats can go anywhere they want right now, just about, and they can get a limit. And there's some areas that they can go, such as Upper Rappahannock, where that limit is primarily going to be larger market size, pretty large oysters. And then there's other areas where there's just as many large market size oysters, but there's also 50 market oysters that are perfectly legal, but are snappy and not necessarily as marketable. So these areas like in Tangier, some of the Patentong areas have as many pretty market oysters there, but they have 10 times as many market oysters as these areas that are open in the Rappahannock. So instead of having 200 oysters per square meter and 5 good markets, you have 5 good markets. So that's sort of, or 10 good markets and not a whole lot else. So that's sort of the difference that many of the folks are seeing when they pull a dredge across the bottom is they pull up a dredge, and after going 100 meters, it comes up clean full of good markets. And if you do that same dredge lick in Tangier in some areas, you might have 10 good markets and 20 markets that aren't necessarily marketable. So just kind of the difference that folks are seeing in these areas. But in terms of actual season extensions, I think the things that have hung us up in the past and done damage to the resource are having these standalone areas. And I understand there has been a strong desire for oysters in March. Some of the folks up here have articulated that March is a time when, Virginia doesn't have a strong oyster market, but there's strong demand. People have kind of recovered from their holiday hangovers of eating all those oysters, and they would like them then. And I always have a cautious approach when it comes to the resource. And again, I don't want to commit to anything now prior to February coming to an end. There might be a reason to have a longer season extension. But one of the things that was proposed is across the board to keep this hard work that we all had done to establish a lot of these season areas, to keep that effort split up and to not focus it intentionally on these areas. These areas that haven't been worked, we're not going to have to come back with 100,000 bushels of shell like we do in the areas that are worked. That's some of the equation that hasn't been mentioned here, is a lot of these areas, when they do get the effort that they haven't got, we have to come back and spend $250,000 or more to get that area back up to where it is today. So if we harvest these areas to the level that they have typically been harvested to, we have to come back and plant shell on top of these areas. If we don't harvest these areas to that level, we don't have to plant shell. Those oysters might die next year, but it's a year rotation. A lot of the oysters that have died have 30 or 40 spat inside of them. So there's no need to replenish these areas if we don't work them at the levels that we've been doing. So that's sort of your budget balance that I'm constantly thinking about. So it's a good thing, the replenishment side of things, that there's a lot less areas. If this season were to end as scheduled that wouldn't need shell, we could do things like we've done in Maratico, Manaskin Bluff areas in the Pocomoke Sound, where we've actually expanded our shell planting program. So those are all things that I think are an important part of this discussion. Is any of these areas that aren't worked are areas that don't need replenishment. We have a finite amount of shell every year. We have a finite amount of dollars every year. We can keep the same areas that we've been maintaining planted with shell if we keep working them as hard as we have been. If we don't work them as hard, they don't need replenishment, we can actually plant new areas, make those areas better, and that's a position that we haven't been in for a long time. We're finally getting to that point now. So that's just a little bit of background on sort of the perspective and sort of the management that I'm thinking about going forward. In terms of a season extension, again, this is the season that we have now that prior to that modification right here. And there are a couple areas of concern that I think folks have brought up already. The Pocomoke portion of Area 2, that rotation has had more effort, not all of it. I don't think, it's had 60, 70 boats working. Is that about right out there on Shell Rock there? In February, there is scheduled to be some hand scrape areas open. We'll start from the bottom up, or the east side there. Those areas are scheduled to open for hand scrape in Pocomoke and Tangier Sound. That should take some of the pressure off there, but again, these areas are hard to replenish. They're hard to get a large shell barge into. They've had seed planted on them. They're not as in good shape as Shell Rock and some of the areas in the Pocomoke are. I think given that Tangier Sound hasn't had much effort, that any season extension would likely be more warranted in the Tangier portion of Tangier and Pocomoke Sound harvest area. There was some talk about season extensions beyond just March that we've been talking about. There's a lot of these hand tong areas that haven't been touched really at all. They have not very many boats working there as well. Blackberry Hangs, that's one of those weather-dependent areas. It did get a phenomenal spat set. The other thing to consider is I can show you if you'd like, or you can take my word for it, or you can take Vim's word for it, but some of these areas have had very good spat set, and another 2 weeks, particularly in areas like Area 4 and Upper Rappahannock and some of the areas in Tangier and Pocomoke Sound that have had really high spat sets, you do end up, when you harvest those areas heavily, killing a lot of those small oysters. So they're just not there anymore. Area 4 is a good example that has been worked. It's had the highest spat set the Upper Rappahannock has in ever, going back to 1947 as far as we have data back. There's areas on Area 4 that have 300 or 400 spat per square meter. Before they were being worked, now they have 30 or 60 spat per square meter after just that month and a half season. So that's sort of when an area is worked heavily, you're harvesting that many market oysters, but that much spat and that much shell is disappearing. So about half the brown shell volume in Area 4 has disappeared as a result of that harvest activity. And that's not even with that full month. So that's what an area has worked traditionally. That's what happens to that area, is basically half the living shell disappears over the course of a season and needs to be put back to maintain it. All that background said, sorry for being long-winded there.
Just a question on that.
Yeah.
When you say it's disappeared, would you say disappeared or moved around?
Well, a lot of that has actually been physically removed in terms of market oysters. A lot of it has been ground into smaller cinders.
The shell has been physically removed?
The live oysters are part of that shell calculation.
So it's a percentage of, it's not that we've lost.
Well, I guess a percentage of it is the actual live oyster. So that's shell that we count towards how much shell we want there. And then by disappeared, I mean it's when we take a patent tong grab, it's not measurable. So when these areas are harvested, some of the shell might get spread out off the rock. It gets ground up into smaller pieces. Small oysters go. It gets degraded and ground up, and it's no longer brown shell. It might be sedimented over because it's been broken up into smaller pieces. It's not these clumps of shell with live oysters. It's broken pieces that are no longer sort of available for spat to sit on. So,
And my reason for asking that question, on the last day of Area 4, I went out, I have a oyster license, and went just to see, and if Drummond Ground, the amount of shell and spat there is there the rest of my life, my kids' life, and my grandkids' life, I would be a happy soul. It's still in phenomenal shape, to the point that if it were mine, I would not even plant shells on it. So I'm not contradicting, I'm just trying to get in my mind as it moved around, because it's still an awesome amount of, I'll call it material, between shell, spat, smalls, and markets that's there. And that's right on top of the rock where they were working. I'm not speaking of the offshore, the other areas, Ferry Bar or Currituman Point, any of those. I'm just speaking right of the bar.
So this is actually, I'll zoom in for folks. So this is the area you're talking about, Drummond Ground, Area 4. This is on the first day of the harvest season. This is what our survey this year. So this is preliminary data. This is just for your viewing pleasure here today. What you're seeing on the right here is the first day of the oyster season. So this had been one-day effort. The spat set, again, 200 spat. This is over all of Area 4. What you're seeing here is small oysters, market oysters, and brown shell volume. This is after its current harvest level. You can see there are, this level of spat dropped, the number of small oysters about half as many, and the same thing in the markets. But the number right here is the brown shell volume. It's gone from 15.15 liters per square meter, so this is live oysters, shell that's available, to 8. So about half of that.
Why wouldn't you back the markets that's harvested out of that number?
What do you mean?
I mean, you're saying when you started that you're calling brown shell the live markets, everything that was there. Well, obviously, after you harvest the markets out of it, that number is going to decrease. That's the whole point of what we do.
That's correct, yeah.
So, I mean, just getting it out on the table, I think, you know, if you come to a group that doesn't understand that, what you said earlier sounds, I mean, you start talking 47% gone as a, you know, I perceive when you say brown shell that we've lost 47% of our caught small oysters, whatever it's going to be there in 3 years. The markets as a part of that, we knew we were taking those out. I mean, I got my team before, I think it's probably a good place to bring this in, but I got my team, this is what our company bought out of these areas. It's public knowledge. Anybody can put a FOIA in and get it, so I'm not sharing confidential information. But Area 4, we bought 13,505 bushels out of that area. I defer to the waterman. Maybe I've got a third, 25%, whatever, what was harvested. But that is a huge number to come away from that brown shell number that did the whole purpose of what we do was to produce that kind of number. So I just think it's misconstrued when you don't explain that the markets came out of this, or that you don't take them out of your calculation.
No, I guess to be clear, 47% of the small and market size oysters, based on this most recent survey, aren't there anymore. So that's oysters that were small combined with the markets, and some of those have grown to markets in that time or sort of on the edge. So of that total number, 47% of the smaller market oysters that were there on the first day of season are not there on after this.
And I still don't get why that's so alarming when we wanted to take the
No,
markets.
it's not alarming. I'm just saying, but the shell volume.
I'd like to hear your opinion. That graph to the left post-harvest. I mean, don't you think that's phenomenal still?
Oh yeah,
when
no,
you
this
look
is
at
this is still it's very good. I mean, a lot of these areas, This shell volume, 8 is good for us. I mean, a lot of these areas with the effort they've had it on before, I mean, 5, I think you guys have heard me say enough that 5 liters of shell volume is kind of a magic number. So when it's over 5 after this harvest, it's still in good shape. I mean, it's still in the, again, you're starting at the best it's ever been. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make, Tommy, is that it's still good, but basically half of those live oysters that we harvested, half of that live shell that's available for recruitment, and a good portion of that spat, and this is areas that haven't been worked combined with the areas that have been. This is the whole area. I mean, I'm just sort of saying to demonstrate that what we anticipate to happen when an area is worked does happen. So this area doesn't need replenishment today, but it's because it started at such a high level, and it still is better than it typically would be.
And I say what I do to bring credibility to the stock assessment too, because I think a lot of people question it, and you know, being explained that we took the markets out of it and that's the number, it makes, you know, and I'll be first to admit I'm probably the dumbest person in this room.
That's not true, Tommy. You know that.
But it makes, you know, I didn't understand. You know, we intentionally took those markets out, so it doesn't bother me as badly as if it were 47% of what's left.
If we'd have put this in reverse, like at the start of the season, you told us it was 15.1 or something brown shell, and then we told you, okay, we're going to take 45,000 bushels off of this or a little more. What could you have told us? Well, if you're going to take that many, what's the brown shell going to be then?
Yeah, I could do that math pretty quick if you wanted me to. I mean, basically,
No.
that's sort of how we do it. I mean, how we replenishment is 1,000 bushels gets you per acre, gets you 10 liters of brown shell. So that's basically how you do the math pretty quickly. Actually, it's about 11 liters, but 10's an easier number to work with.
That brown shell that you put back, or that shell that you put back, has no smalls, large, or spat or anything.
Right. So that's that, and all these market oysters and small oysters, that's that shell that's available, whether it lives or dies, for more oysters to grow on. So that's why we don't replenish areas that have that many live oysters, because they don't need it. There's plenty of substrate there.
Good question, Wayne.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Andrew, how many areas did you survey on this? How many spots?
The only area that we've resurveyed since the fall, as of this meeting, has been Area 4, because there had been some concern about the level of effort that's there. And I guess that 50% number that we're kicking around, the reason that I mentioned that is there is, in current regulation, the commissioner has the ability to just close an area when it's determined by the Conservation and Replenishment Department that the standing stock, as determined by the Replenishment Department, has been depleted by 50% or more. So that's sort of in code or in regulation, and has been for some time.
So this was just drumming ground, right?
This is all of Area 4, so Drummond Ground, all the stuff in the Coratoman and Ferry Rock as well.
Okay,
And I'm not asking for an extension on this, I'm just making a point, we're leaving it really good. I think it's probably a good place to leave it, but
And this is, there's still a month, as you said, there's still scheduled without any changes, a month of harvest to this area, and it's right on that line where the commissioner could decide to close it based on that 50%.
can you go back mid-February and do the same thing? And get a state of the oyster rock?
It wouldn't really be practical necessarily to do that. It's something that we could do, but we can only have so many boat days and survey days, and I mean, we can survey all the time, but we have a pretty good idea that it's depending on how many boats there, how much effort, and based on pre-stock assessment surveys, we have a pretty good idea that another 2 weeks, it would likely be lower than this, another 4 weeks. You know, it depends, again, on how many boats there. If everyone who was gonna stay in the James during this season extension goes up here and works Area 2 doesn't work out as well as everyone hoped, and then you have 70 boats in Area 4 for 4 weeks, that probably wouldn't be good. That would likely be an area that we may have to look at spending some replenishment dollars before, but it's probably gonna be better even after that than it would have been if it had been open for 2 months and there had been 120 boats there catching 24 bushels, which is what used to happen. So, and again, we were at a higher starting point, but again, these are a lot of if-thens. But I guess before there's any motions, I guess what I would put forward as an option for SMAC to consider and think about would be leave what the commission did today. I don't think there's any way to change anything for the month of February at this meeting. So I think sort of those 2 days, given the meeting and the timing of the commission meeting. But what I had mentioned at the commission meeting as an option for you all to consider, and it doesn't have to be a decision now, would be to look at a 10 calendar day extension in basically all the areas across the board, with a few exceptions. So Pocomoke, Sound 9 and 10 would have their normal closing date. Pocomoke Area 2 would have its normal closing date, so the end of February. We'll work through it this way first, everything in February. Basically, everything that was scheduled to close February 28th, everything, including Area 1, Area 4 would be off the table. Blackberry Hangs would be on there. And that's York River, yeah, York River as well, which has had about 6 to 8 boats working that rock. And I think 3 years ago, last time it was open, it had 70 boats. I think even Dan came across. So this is an area that has had light pressure, but extending all of those areas by 10 days, so it keeps sort of the balance that we'd worked hard on. And then when you get into March, again, extend all of this 10 days. There was some talk from Peyton earlier about clean cull seasons being extended, but basically across the board, every area, the season has been so good. The resources in such good conditions. I don't think 10 calendar days is going to hurt anything. That doesn't just give you March, that gives you another 8 working days into April. So it extends a lot of seasons that were already extended almost through the whole month, sort of keeps that balance in place. And from a resource perspective, it keeps things spread out as they are rather than focusing effort in there. So that would be one option to consider. So it would give you another 10 working days at Deep Rock, another 10 working days at Area 1, and across the board. But with those exceptions of Area 4, maybe even consider closing that early. Pocomoke, Sound areas leaving their scheduled closing date. And that's something that I think, again, I don't want to commit to it now, but is a possible staff recommendation going forward that I think I would hope addresses a lot of the concerns, both on the resource side, the replenishment needed, and providing resource for a longer period of time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going
Yeah, go ahead.
to clarify this. I'm a little slow. So you're thinking about 10 days, like in York, extension of that? 10, and then you look, how about Blackberry Hang? Same?
Yep.
Okay. And the dredge in Tangier,
Correct.
both Tangier and Pocomoke, both areas?
I would say just Tangier, given the comments and the areas there. I think it probably would work okay in Pocomoke Sound, but that effort has been so focused on one area that there could be a temptation to keep working that area. They'll probably keep getting the limit, but it's likely wouldn't be good for the resource to extend it there.
So you won't have any standalone areas?
Correct.
I see where you're getting at here.
Would Great Wacomico Area 2 be added to that with Blackberry so that
Yeah.
Yep.
neither one of those would be a standalone? So Great Wacomico
If we got 15,
Area 2 is the only one that would,
I don't know when you can put pots over.
is that slated to end this month, correct?
Yeah, that would get another 10 days as well.
That would be 10 days in March.
10 days in February, so basically extend
Just 10 extra days.
extra
everywhere.
days, yeah.
So it wouldn't close and reopen, it just
Right.
stayed.
So I guess I'd want to hear from the waterman the idea of maybe taking that 10 days that it would have been the 1st of February and maybe mirror the 10 last days of Blackberry. You follow me?
As opposed to the 10.
Yeah, instead
First
of
days.
getting, and I'd want to hear from, I know Mr. Rice works that area, but I would, that would give less pressure at the end on Blackberry. And
Isn't it a moot point because you can't extend February since we've already had the commission meeting and that was done today? So you would have to do Great Wacomico in March, correct?
Well,
I
I,
mean, that was the,
Correct.
I think you would have to match it up with Blackberry, because we've already done through the commission meeting, the emergency actions this morning.
That's correct.
That's a good point. Which, it's in keeping with I was thinking, you know, you're gonna have 2 good weeks on BlackBerry, and then at the end of it, you'd have something else come online, so you don't have a standalone. You know, some people might go to 2 and some go to BlackBerry, but it would take some pressure off of BlackBerry at the end of it, based on your comments of how good it looks, so.
So you would be extending Blackberry 10 days in March and Great Wacomico 10 days in March?
Yeah, instead of the 10 days, which probably technically we couldn't do anyway in
Right.
February, we would do that in March to mirror up with the, but other than that, and I'm gonna say this and stop, I guess you started here, and I don't want it to end here, but, on this end of the table, but, I would like some sort of commitment that, and I think you're a good place, if you're working there, Mr. France, to be in touch with staff on Area 4.
Sure.
And if we can't do a survey, at least get a 2-week update.
Yeah, I can certainly give a, idea of how many boats are working that area and what it looks like.
If need be, at the end of the 2-week work, and if feel like the commissioner needs to make that decision to close it, he could do it without having to go through a formal process here at the commission, correct?
Yep, no, he could do that, and I think it's safe to say that we're on that 50% threshold close enough that, another 2 weeks, we'd be over that threshold, and I'd be comfortable making that recommendation that it has been, I don't want to sound an alarmist, Tommy, but been depleted by 50%, the standing stock, and that's markets and smalls, yep.
Got a question. Is it 10 working days we're extending?
Calendar days.
Calendar days,
And it would sort of vary from area to area how many, but it's about eight extra days
only 30 days.
if there's a
total.
weekend there, yep.
Calendar days.
Can I
So,
ask a question?
am I looking at this calendar right, Andrew? That would take us to the 14th.
10 days.
10
You're saying-
days would take us to the 14th, what I'm seeing.
You're talking about 10 days, Dan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
10 working
That's
days.
what I'm looking at too, yeah. 10 working days.
And I'm asking, am I right on that, Andrew? I think, I don't know.
I was proposing just 10 calendar days, so that would take you from, I guess it would be 13 days.
We mean 13.
Okay.
You mean it would close on the 13th?
13 calendar days.
Thir-
Right.
No, it'd be 10 calendar days, the 10th, but 8 working days, excuse me. I'm looking at my 10 and my 3 there and adding them up, but 8 calendar days, yep.
The 10th of March.
So when I'm looking at this month, we got 15 working days left out of this month. And we're getting
This
8.
month?
Not this month.
No, in
Going
March.
into March.
March, yeah.
There it is right there.
With 2 days that we're gonna possibly lose,
be that.
if we close Area 4, I would, my suggestion would be 10 working days, but that's just
If you know what I mean.
my suggestion.
I agree with that. I think 10 working days
I
is
think
not
that'd be
asking
easier to-
too much.
Keep track of.
I think it's a compromise from a man.
You're going 10 days in
Um,
March.
I speaking for myself, I really don't think I'll be doing it the full time, with crabbing coming up. And I think there's quite a few people that'll have that mentality. But I think 10 working days, taking it to the 14th, I would go along. I would rather see that.
If I'm looking at it right, March has 23 working days into it.
31-day month, yeah.
And if we're only getting
That's
8,
correct.
you see where I'm
Yeah, it
going?
would be a little less than half.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think 14, that's a good, it's a
Go with
recommendation.
14, but I would like to have the 10 working days out of 23. So it's not half, but it's close.
Mr. Chairman, what about Patentong? You said you want to extend Area 1 too also?
No,
Or no, a Deep Rock?
Deep Rock.
I would say that across the board, it will keep effort spread out there to have all those areas extended. I think Area 1's already had an extension, but extending them together, keeps too much pressure from being
Well,
on one area there.
So Deep
Deep
Rock
Rock-
would be the 29th,
Yeah, would be, Deep Rock,
29th of March.
Deep Rock ends at the middle of the month.
That's
So we
correct.
extend it to the, basically the
Right.
end of the month.
And, I mean, again, it's not a recommendation for me at this point, but I think what it's sounding like is 10 working days, and that would be
March 29th.
March 29th.
Okay.
Can I ask one question? A dumb question, probably. How about the Bianca tank in Wycomico? Is that gonna open this spring?
I think there wasn't consensus at the last SMAC committee meetings that we had on that about what to do, so that might be a little bit more of a topic to get into than we want to now. We are gonna look at some areas of those seed areas that we want to relook at before we have a decision on that, so I don't have a firm recommendation on that. And that is something that, given the amount of oysters that we have in these other areas, I don't know that that's a pressing thing to get those oysters now today. And that's something that we could look at if we want to do anything in part of the replenishment plan, moving those areas to other areas. But that is something that we had discussed, but again, there wasn't a good consensus on what to do with those areas, whether seed, whether open harvest areas, quota management, and there was some concern on that. So that might be a little bit more to bite off than, unless you all, I don't know, if anyone brought
We've
snacks,
gotten
we'll
to
be
the
here a
end
little
of
while.
March to
Let me-
talk about that.
Let me get a vote here first, before we go on any further on, how the committee stands here on a 10-day or 2 weeks. I mean, that's what I want to know, Tommy.
For 10 working days.
I'm also 10 working days.
I mean, 10 working days over 2 weeks. Is that the question?
2 weeks or 10 working days?
Which is the same thing.
Is-
It's
yeah,
same
basically
thing?
the same thing.
Well, I think before it was like 8 working days.
10 calendar days or 10 working days.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 calendar days or 10 working days.
10 working days.
I mean, if, Andrew, you're saying there's no concern over these extensions from a, a scientific depletion type of point of view, because it's being so spread out, that I don't have an issue with that.
I think the only area we're worried about really is Area 4.
And Pocomoke, is that the only ones that are?
Well, Area 4 is in the Rappahannock, and that's been the most extensively worked, and I think we've come up with a plan to keep a report to Andrew going on how many boats are working there, and he can get the information on the buyers of what the oysters look like. Right, Andrew?
Yeah, and I would say that there's no concern, but I think that there's less concern than if we have a standalone area. I mean, the reality is that this is more or less an economic decision for the commission to make. The resource is not really good for the resource to take more of the resource in most cases. It might make more marketable oysters by dredging an area, but it doesn't actually make more oysters and more marketable oysters in this area. It just makes it easier to catch by a dredge, just to clarify. But I don't think that a 10 calendar day extension, keeping the balance in place, would be, we'd still be in better shape after that likely than we would be and have been in a long time. So if there's a good time to have a purely economic extension, it's likely this season. But again, that's at some point, every shell that you remove, you have to pay back in one way or another.
Jackie, did you decide?
10 working days.
10 working days, okay.
10 days, 10 working days.
10 working days.
10 working days.
10 working days.
No one wants less oysters.
Well, we want less.
Okay.
So I guess that's consensus of the committee here.
She might get
Okay.
6 of them, say,
Yeah, I know, it's not like we're guaranteed 10 working days.
No, we're not.
I mean, it's,
Don't speak of the weather, you'll summon it upon us, but,
I know, but
really good, just wanna,
Tangier Sands one of the worst places I've ever been in my life dredging. I can tell you, it's not fun.
Now,
He lives there.
now, I'm sorry, I forgot, Don on the phone, Dan?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, are you for 10 calendar days or 10 working days?
10 working days.
All right, thank you.
I think also we have Beverly Ludford there on the phone. Beverly, are you able to hear us?
I am 10 working days.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, now I guess the next thing we can go over real quick that we want to bring to the commission or discuss at our next meeting, I'll get Andrew to go just quickly over the bars that we are considering.
Okay, so in terms of those 10 calendar days, let me pull it up here. That was for all the areas scheduled that will be closing February or later. So with the exceptions of Area 4, no 10 working day extension there, and no 10-day extension in the Pocomoke Sound areas 9 and 10 or Pocomoke area 2. So that 10 calendar day extension would be for Tangier area 2, Blackberry Hangs, Indian Creek.
Andrew?
Yep.
You keep saying 10 calendar days, but it's
Oh.
working days, right? that
Yeah,
we're
excuse
talking
me,
about.
working days. I'll just call it 10 days and we'll know that it's working. 10-day extension, as proposed and agreed on to the committee. The areas that would not have that 10-day extension, again, Pocomoke Sound areas, and Area 4 in Rappahannock, and all the other areas would have that 10-day extension, including the, I'm fine with not the seed areas that gets into that, but into the hand-tong areas. That one we might have to readdress, actually, so I take that back on that in terms of warm weather harvest extension. We'd have to work on the language on that, but we'll hold on that one. We'll have a little bit of time. But these other hand-tong areas, I think they're fine having a 10-day extension across the board. York River, 10-day extension, both the hand-tong and the scrape areas. Patent-tong areas, both 10-day extensions. So everything except those Pocomoke Sound, really, and the James River hand-tong areas, and the Rappahannock area 4.
Is that still gonna be 12 o'clock?
Yes, yep. I mean, I think that's been working. That's been a good sort of safety measure on this. If it does get out of hand, that you can't work past that time, and that's when you really are end up damaging that rock there, and it prevents it. It has been so good that I think I haven't heard any temptation of anyone double dipping at this point, but that was one of the concerns that I think have been brought up from a resource perspective.
Andrew,
Yes, go ahead.
thank you. You said we're in a fortunate position where we may be able to start opening new areas using some of those replenishment shells. This wouldn't compromise that, would it?
I don't think nearly as much as a month-long extension in some of these areas. So if one of these whole areas, basically, let's say we shut down everything except the York River, and all the fleet went to the York River, and they caught a month straight with 120 boats there, then we probably have to plant shell there, where we're probably not going to have to plant it this year. So I don't think we're going to be in that situation. I think there's going to be a marginal change, but not we'll likely still be in the best shape we have been in a while. So it's not a complete, wash, that no resource concerns, but it's definitely not the level of resource concerns as if we had a standalone area for a longer period of time.
Ladies and gentlemen, are we in a good place here now to maybe send this plan to the commission? I'll take a consensus, just a nod of heads.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Pocomoke, the hand scrape areas, was that being extended, or you do not want to do that?
I wouldn't have a recommendation for an extension there. I think those areas are hard enough to replenish, and I haven't even seen how much effort they're going to have in that scrape season yet this year. I mean, there were a fair number of boats out there in that 2 weeks.
I'm fine with Tangier, 10 working days. I think it would be all right.
You gentlemen okay with this plan? Dan?
Yes, sir.
Good. Tommy? I am also, thank you, Andrew. I think we've compromised here and come up with something that'll work for us.
I think you all need to congratulate yourselves that we're in this position right now. So it's, a lot of you have been up there and part of this committee longer than I've been in this position, and it's good to be able to even have these discussions. So we're in a good spot. So
I'm sorry, I forgot the lady and gentleman on the phone. Are they okay with this to send to the commission?
working day, yes, or yeah, everything that Andrew said, yes.
We got somebody else on there.
Yeah, that's good to me too.
Oh, I forgot about you, Cody. Yep. All right.
Right. All right, what you got next? Is that it for now, or?
I think that JC, and if
That's right,
anybody
JC
wants-
had a couple.
I think I got them written down there if you want to knock them out. There, and then Tommy had his fisheries improvement. I think we're doing okay on folks' time. The oyster user fee transfer requirements.
Yep.
So I can give a quick overview
Okay.
of what happened on that one. So you were all there when the SMAC had their recommendations, and they included, I believe, the 40-day transfer was still a part of that, but you had to have, harvest history. That recommendation was presented to senior staff at the commission, and after discussion with senior staff, a staff recommendation was made to the commission to allow the transfer of the oyster all gear user fee if you had 5 years of paying that oyster user fee. So that was the recommendation that was presented to the commission at the commission meeting, was if you paid that user fee for 5 years, you could transfer it. There was, I think, some both committee concern and staff concern on that recommendation that would have allowed the majority of people that haven't fished a single day using their license, approximately 400 people, to then be eligible to transfer that license. At the committee meeting, the commission meeting, excuse me, the recommendation was modified to the following, which is that I should pull the regulation up here so I could read it for you, but I've got it pretty well memorized. I've explained it, believe it or not, a number of times, that you can now transfer your oyster user fee if you meet one of the two following conditions. So if you have paid, you have to meet this one for sure for all transfers except for family transfers, is you have to have paid that oyster user fee for the previous 5 calendar years. So right now you have to have paid it in 2023, in 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22. And you either have to have a medical exception or be deceased, and then your heirs or the caretakers of your estate can transfer your license or have a medical exception. And you can transfer it if you have that 5 years of user fee history, or if you don't have a medical exception or are still living, you can transfer that user fee if you have 3 of those previous 5 calendar years, some history of harvest. So you have to have at least 1 day of harvest history in 3 of those previous 5 years. And that was the regulation that was approved at the commission. So the SMAC recommendation was presented to the commission, the staff recommendation was presented to the commission, and the commission modified that, and that was what was passed. That addresses the majority of those concerns. I know there was a cap on the age of 70 there.
Don't mention that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think this covers a lot of that in terms of
It
you still
does.
have to have used it, but there's not a clear, if there's no medical exception, and you have 5 years of harvest history, you still couldn't, or 5 years of paying the user fee, you could just transfer it. But my guess is a lot of the 70-year-olds who are still fishing, likely if they want to transfer their license, they could likely get a medical exception to do so. So I think it covers
Okay.
most of that. But there is no longer, the biggest change is there is no longer a 40-day requirement to transfer the license. And regardless of medical exception or death, you can't transfer your license to a non-family member, sort of outside the direct family member, if you haven't had that user fee for 5 years. So the thing that has come up is folks that have only had it for 2 years, they may have had their 40 days, they can no longer transfer their license.
They can't, right? They gotta have 5. Okay, let me go down my list, and that way I can get it organized here. So military, if I'm called to National Guard duty or whatever, do I have to have bought my license 5 years, and do I have to have the 3 years? That applies to that?
To transfer it, yes, but
Yep.
there is an exception, same exception to get back into the fishery. So if you missed
Okay.
purchasing that user fee, or you were deployed and you couldn't buy it, you can get back in, but the transfer
Okay.
requirements
So
aren't.
military, you gotta have the 5 plus 3. Okay, okay, on medical, and I know we got a perfect example sitting right on side of us here with that. Maybe Ernie would wanna talk a little bit about what happened to him. I don't think a lot of people realize, what could happen, right, Ernie?
I don't think anybody should have to pay for the license 3 times in 1 year, and that's what y'all were getting ready to make me do. I mean, if I was sick for 2 weeks, what good would it be me to do it? I mean, I bought my license in 23. My boy was gonna have to buy them again, and then when I got them back, I was gonna have to buy them again. So therefore, I just did away with it. And I mean, if that's the way it is, I think y'all ought to do away with the whole program, if that's what y'all gotta have.
There might have just been some confusion on the way our licensing program works is.
It was the worst thing I ever experienced down here that day. And I won't never come back and ask for it again. As long as I live, I'll just stay home if I get sick.
No,
Because I think it was very unfair, and I don't think anybody down here thought about it. If you're sick, you don't need a heart attack coming down here to deal with it.
just to give the board
Whatever.
an idea of what's going on. Ernie has to have open heart surgery, plus he's got another medical condition he has to get straight first. And then if he goes to see the open heart surgery, he's gonna be months before he would be able to go back to work. So he wanted to transfer his license to his son so he could keep working. And this is what happened during that process. So it's
And I
not
just
all.
stopped
You
it all.
buy them back in the same year? After you done paid for them
I
twice?
paid for them 3 more times,
Three more times, yeah.
3 times.
That's
I
not
paid for them in 23, then my boy was gonna have to pay for them, and then I was gonna have to pay for them to get them back from him. And I think I couldn't believe it. It's the worst thing I ever had since I've been coming down here to Waterman for 50-something years that I had to deal with. And I won't never come again for it. I'll just do a favor.
Yeah. So that's his story. I just want him to tell that because I
Yeah, I
knew
waste my
what he went
time
through.
and gas to come down here at these meetings, don't charge VMRC 1 dime, and they treated me that way. I thought it was very rude, the way it all went down. And I won't never ask them again.
Well, I'm sorry you
all
had
I'll
to go
say
through
about
that. I think, it's one of those things that I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I wasn't here that day, but I think we did resolve it where you didn't have to pay multiple times. But as long as you pay 1 user fee per year, and whoever is going to fishing also has to pay that. So
Right.
I'm not sure about.
Then when you get it back, you gotta buy it back.
I think the license, and it's just a matter of how our system works, that it's hard to.
I say you need to do away with it. If that's the way it works, you need to do away with it. You can't transfer.
Well, I think we can work
Should
through
be
that, and that's one of those unique situations that is very unfortunate that it happened that way, and I'm sorry
Well,
that
I'm
it did.
glad it happened to me because I wouldn't want it to happen to anybody else the way it happened.
And I think that'll be a learning experience for us, and it's something that we can make sure that look at what happened there and that.
I mean, when it's medical,
Yep.
that's totally different, I would think.
It's medical and family.
All they had to do was sign a little paper to put on my license to give to my son, and it would have been done. Would have to go through what I went through here that day? No.
So Sandra, for him to do that medical transfer, he had to have the 5 plus the 3 also for that, to qualify for it?
Not for the medical transfer.
Not for medical.
For a family member, you don't need anything other than relation.
Okay.
But for a medical transfer, you have to have 5 years of paying that user fee, but you don't need
Well, I
the
had all
harsh
the
requirement.
time.
Right, but I was thinking of somebody else, But, and you still have to have the 3 years of harvest,
Not for a medical, no.
not for medical, okay.
And that would be different if you had a special exemption like an agent. You don't have agents in the oyster fishery.
No agents. Yeah.
Okay, deaf.
Death is treated the same as a medical exception, the ultimate medical exception, I guess, but that you'd have to have that 5 years, but you would not have to have had any harvest history for death.
Okay, to transfer to a non-family member.
Non-family, that's correct.
Okay, as you can see, it's very confusing, still very confusing. It probably ain't gonna never be cleared up. And I got a lot of members that constantly ask me about this, you know, and so it's a big topic. We worked on it a long time. We worked on it probably 2 years off and on. And, you know, it was a little disappointing to me, I think, the way SMAC recommendations was handled, but it is what it is. And hopefully we can go forward and maybe this will accomplish something.
Yeah, I can tell this committee here, I know the recommendations that we had made that night to send to the commission. When the commission meeting came up, what was presented to us was totally different than what SMAC had decided to do.
Right, exactly.
I think that staff presented the SMAC recommendation, but the staff recommendation, this is not the Andrew Button recommendation, this is the staff recommendation,
All right.
was what was presented there.
And it kind of caught us off guard, and it wasn't what we were expecting.
Yeah.
And so we tried to come up with something that
Yeah.
was kind of in the middle there.
Well, you know, like Ernie said, we come down here and we come to a lot of these meetings at our own expense, you know, and we sit here and we hash this stuff out and we come up with a solution, we pass it in committee, and then nothing happens, nothing it shows up when it goes to vote for the commission meeting. We're not even considered in the any of the motions, recommendations that we had. So I think that was why a lot of SMAC members were very upset about it, you know.
Slap in the face is what that was.
Yeah.
Just for the record, is the SMAC recommendation verbatim was put up on the screen and presented to the commission. So that is something that I'll do as long as I'm here, is I try my best to present what you present fairly to the commission the way it was presented, my understanding.
Well, let me ask you this then, Andrew. You said staff changed it. Why? What was the reason? Why did staff want to change SMAC's recommendation?
I wasn't involved in those discussions
You
directly.
weren't involved in?
No.
I don't know. There's some cross wires there somewhere. Okay, let's go on. Let's get Andrew, another thing I wanted to ask you, you know, President, we can keep 8 bushels of oysters. That's what we're selling, you know. Why in the world can't a waterman take a bucket of oysters home to eat? I mean, it's ridiculous that we have this small quota, but the working waterman can't take a bucket of oysters home to eat for supper at night, you know. I mean, is there anything we can do about that? I mean, is that something on a regulatory side, you know? I know we only allowed 8 bushels, but daggone. I mean, it's a process, it's a job to go through. I mean, if I was selling to Tommy, I'd have to go back and buy a bushel of oysters or half a
Give
bushel.
you a bucket back.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I might defer to law enforcement on that one after I answer part of it, but I think the short answer is basically commercial and recreational harvest generally aren't mixed in the way we manage things.
Right.
And then on the oyster side specifically, is commercially harvested oysters are required to go through a certified dealer, and it can probably from an enforcement perspective get to be a pretty slippery slope of, well, these are my 8 commercial baskets and this is my 1 personal basket. Also by code, which I can't change personally, you're only allowed to harvest 1 bushel per day with hand or ordinary tongs for personal use. So there's no personal use oysters caught with dredges. So that's, or patent tongs. So those are commercial gears. But I understand what you're saying, but those are the reasons, and I think there's a pretty good workaround that if you are selling to a certified dealer, which you're legally required to do, I'm not sure that there's any certified dealer that won't go, here's your bushel. So if that's not the case, I think it's a relatively easy workaround that it shouldn't be any problem to take a bushel home if you want to. Just get the certified dealer tag with it, and that's all you need to do.
Okay.
People that can harvest a bushel a day, do they have to buy a license to do that?
I know by code that's one of the few things that you don't need even a fishing license to do, to go out with ordinary tongs or by hand and harvest a bushel for personal use.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons that oysters are protected in the Constitution, is it's Virginia, is that every person has a right to their 1 bushel per day when that area is open to that gear for that season.
Now, can they harvest them from anywhere, or does it have to be from a piece of ground that's open?
It has to be from a piece of ground open to hand tongs or by hand. So you can't go hand tong oysters in an area that's only open to to hand scrape or dredge. I doubt there'll be anyone out there at Tangier and Pocomoke Sound with a 40-foot pair of shafts, but
They don't have to report them either, do they?
that's correct. They don't have to report them. They're not for consumption in the markets. They don't have the same National Shellfish Sanitation Program. They do have to follow the same culling regulations, but not the reporting requirements.
Is that 7 days a week or only Monday through Friday?
My understanding, and I did run this through Oyster, our law enforcement division, and the way that the code reads and the regulation reads, it's a little bit contrary, but it is 7 days a week is our consensus on what the code and regulation currently said. So that's, and again, it's during the harvest hours, so 2 p.m., not daylight, sun up to sundown.
So does that qualify by hand also, or is it just hand tongs?
So the by hand is a little bit tricky, but by hand, the only season that is up here that is by hand, the way that we are defining it today is on the eastern shore seaside of Accomack and Northampton counties. Those are the only areas where you can legally harvest by hand. It is something I think that we kind of discussed, sort of allowing by hand or hand tong. That's traditionally how it had been in these hand tong areas, is those sort of gears were almost interchangeable. People would sometimes get a by hand license and they would be hand tonging and get a hand tong license and by hand. But since we went to the all gear user fee, that kind of went away and we made that distinction. But if, for example, the commission were to allow by hand harvest in any of these areas, that's not currently a regulated closed fishery, so that would allow commercial by hand harvest in any area that we opened it up to, and that would basically be similar to what Maryland does for their dive fishery. So if we had a by hand season in these areas, that would open it up to recreational and commercial by hand harvest, and that would be not a restricted fishery because it wouldn't be subject to that all year user fee.
Got a question. Me, as a waterman, can I go after I get off the boat and sell my 8 bushels? Could I possibly go out and pick a bushel up for my own personal use?
I would defer to law enforcement on that. I think.
I'm not that I'm going to do it. I'm just asking a question here. If everybody else in this state can go out there without buying a license, can go pick up a bushel of oysters.
I think that,
Why
again, I
can't
don't
I
want to
do
speak
it?
for law enforcement, but it's. I think you'd be better off going on a Saturday, but there is a vessel limit that you have there. But I think if, given that the by hand harvest and by hand tong harvest is higher than that, I think if your dredge is on the shore and you're going out there and you don't have a tag, you don't even need a tag for these oysters. If you're
Why do
doing
you need a tag?
No, because they're not for consumption. So you're going out there.
But there's nobody there.
Consumption.
They're only for personal consumption. They're for personal consumption.
Always selling them to somebody, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not that I'm going to do it.
You'd be afoul of a whole bunch of other laws and regulations and the National Shellfish Sanitation folks, and him and all his friends would be coming after you if you started selling all those oysters. But
Not coming after me, because I ain't going out there to get them.
The only problem I have with that is if somebody gets sick eating those oysters, the rest of us who do everything right pay for it.
They're for personal use only, so they're not tagged. They're just for household use. There could still be a trace back refrigeration. There is an aspect, but it's the same as if basically it's treated the same as if I went to you and I bought a bushel of oysters, and then I mistreated them. So that's the same thing. It's never leaving that person. They're not selling them. That's sort of the difference there.
Yeah, and you get sick, I still get in trouble.
Right, but in this case, it wouldn't be traced back to you. It'd be traced back to that person. And I think, given our relationship that we have with VDH and the FDA through our long partnership, that if someone got sick off of personal use, I'm hopeful that would be a relatively narrow concern, that there wouldn't be that trace back. I don't think, again, I don't want to speak for something that hasn't happened yet, but I think that would. I would like to hope that working with VDH and the feds on that side, that wouldn't be a huge issue for the industry.
Well, I guess that's why me and Tommy do about 300 pages of paperwork every day.
It's still hard for most folks to go out and get a bushel. I mean, some folks up there have done plenty of patent tonging, but your average Joe isn't going to go out there, I think, and there's not a lot of, that I'm aware of, recreational hand tong harvest going on, other than I do go out occasionally and get a bushel, but just for exercise.
Okay, I got one more thing, Wayne.
One more time.
I got one more thing, Andrew, and I'll get out your hair.
I don't have any.
I've been asked this question by a couple of watermen, and it's a regulation, and I want to get your thoughts on what we'd have to do to change it if
I
it
thought
would
we
be
already
possible.
added your agenda items. You keep slipping more in there.
No, we haven't talked about this one. At the present time, you can buy a single patent dog license, and you're allowed to catch, if you have two people on the boat, you're allowed to catch 16 bushels with a single patent dog license. Well, VMRC sells a double patent dog license. So at the present time, the regulation says you cannot exceed 16 bushels in a boat for that license. If someone buys a double patent dog license and they have 4 8-bushel licensed people on board, can we up that bushel limit from 16 bushels to 32 bushels? Be no change in the regulation, no change in the bushel quotas. All we're doing is consolidating 2 boats into 1 boat. I just want to get the thoughts of the committee here on that, and what you think we would have to do to change that regulation.
Are there any thoughts from the committee on that?
I got a thought.
One thing in it,
Oh.
Okay.
I think you're going to open up a can of worms on that, JC. I think it's going to turn into what it used to be when you had the 24 bushel thing. I know the example you're giving is sounding picture perfect, but what's going to end up happening is people's going to go out and try to find every crackhead they can find to get eight extra bushels.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to open up a can of worms on that.
Yeah, well, I think really, Diana, I think we're talking less than 5 boats. If you get that many people to do it, it takes a big boat to be able to do it. And of course, it would be a lot of extra expense to put the double rig in. And I don't know if it would be feasible, but I was just asked by some of my members, and so I just wanted to.
taking one boat off the rock too.
Yeah.
What's the 2 on that?
I don't know about all that. We went through all this with the 24 bushels. Everybody was saying you allow 24 bushels, it's one more one more boat off the rock. I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that at all. We've all seen this before. And look, I'm just saying my thoughts on it. I just think you're opening up a can of worms. You're going to get more people's going to figure out that they can get 3 more people aboard or 2 more people aboard and catch 32. It's just the way we are. That's how we roll.
Well,
And then you're going to be putting that many more bushels on the market. And I think a can of worms is going to get opened up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, JC, but, I could support this, but the only way I could support it would be that it would be only allowed on deep rock.
Yeah. And there is precedent, we did increase the hand tone quota from 8 bushels to 14 bushels per license, 28 bushels to the boat. So that, it's not something, we're not doing anything out of the ordinary that hasn't been done before. It's just a different style of fishery. Yeah.
Well, I'm not really for that either, but I'll let that go. I've said enough.
Well,
I think, I guess it would require regulatory change. I'd want to look and sort of see how this season shook out. And I don't know if that would be a change that we'd want to make at the same time we're extending these areas, and with Dan's concerns there and market conditions, I think it would be definitely something that we should consider probably more fully for, I know, maybe you guys are getting tired of hearing it, but I do think incremental approaches to these changes, there's already been we're already having the longest season we've had in a long while here, so it might be prudent of us to look at some sort of adjustment if there is any going forward after we've seen how this season plays out. But I think it is something that we could do regulatorily. It would be, we'd have to get the language right, have to work with law enforcement on making sure
and would it be have to be
enforcement was.
passed through the commission?
It would have to go through the commission, yeah.
With SMAC recommendation?
And I think just what that double rig allows you to do is just have 2 sets of tongs. So it's you can have 2 people working, and you could get your limit quicker now. Maybe if you had 2 people calling, but there isn't.
It really don't, I've never done it, but I've seen a lot of them used to do it years ago, and it doesn't work that way. You don't catch them twice as fast. It doesn't work that way, but it is an improvement, and I think it would eliminate, a small portion of the fleet, we would consolidate it, but, maybe a lot of other people don't.
You got the stabilizers out too.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
All right, I think, Ms. Cullum, you're up.
I'll be quick, I appreciate it. For those of you that don't know, the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Virginia Seafood Council started a fishery improvement project, which is a sustainability study that's done by an outside party. We started the process 2 years ago, and the reason for it was Wegmans, Whole Foods, Kroger, Publix, and Walmart, which is a significant portion of Virginia's market for shucked oysters, was gonna discontinue buying Virginia product without a sustainability certification. So the Virginia Seafood Council worked with the Marine Products Board, and JC was instrumental in that. Got funding from the Seafood Council and from the Marine Products Board. AJ Erskine and myself, AJ's done most of the work, interviewed potential certifying bodies, and we settled on one called MREG Americas down in Florida. So at the end of the day, we started off with a C rating. There's a number of things that go into that, and I think we've pretty well set a record. We're up to an A rating in 1 year, and I just wanted to relay, going back to the work that staff and this committee and all done, the 6 of the things that were noted in getting our rating raised so quickly came from this season, not raising the limit. Dan, I think, talked about that earlier. We had some discussion around that. Reducing the time limit, the amount of replenishment that this agency is doing, and the percentage of that that's actually dedicated to sanctuary as opposed to just being harvest. The use of house shells as part of the replenishment. Stakeholder cooperation, which I think Jackie's being here speaks to that, and overall the SMAC committee itself and its interaction with the agency. So we were competing, the state of Louisiana and Texas had a sustainability study done. They had millions of dollars of BP money to do that. So we've actually, time-wise, sort of surpassed where they were at on getting theirs. They achieved a full certification. But without belaboring it, I think it's a huge testament to everybody in this room. The sacrifices made by watermen, the work put out by staff, and the hours this committee puts in to get where we're at. We're still about a year out. The only recommendations at this time from MRAG that we've got to address is they would like to see a small sustainability committee, and I'll reach out to our new chief on that. I think we're doing most everything there through the work of this committee. They think we need to address the introduction of young people into the fishery. Sustainability is not only the resource, it's the culture and the viability of the economy of it. I know that our new chief is working on some programs to talk about young people, so I don't think we're talking about any work in this committee. I think it's just a small group, one time, kind of funneling all these things together. So I think we've got what we need. We just need to get it in a box that needs to be put in for the sustainability study. And lastly, minutes for the SMAC meeting. The auditor complained about not being able to just look at some brief minutes that were posted. He had to go back and look through the video of the whole and sort of decipher. So it's asked that we actually have abbreviated, short, approved minutes for each SMAC meeting. So I can't tell you how many hours have gone into this. It's been an immense process. Sometimes it's a disgusting process when you think about everything else you could be doing, and that we've got all these things and we just have to can it together. But I think for those 2 small recommendations out of the material they've been through is a testament to what we're doing here in Virginia. And we've kept these. I can speak to Kroger and Whole Foods are extremely excited about where we're at. The World Wildlife Federation oversees all of this, and we just recently submitted the material and came back with a lot of attaboys from their team on where we've got. And I think the work of everybody in this room is how we got there. So I appreciate it, and would ask staff maybe to give some consideration to those two little recommendations. It's not like we're under a gun that we got to have that done immediately, but it continues us moving forward in the process, so.
Well, I'll check on the minutes, Tommy, but we typically do post those, so there might have been a meeting where they just weren't posted on the internet, but we always do have those. So if that does happen again, it might just be something we overlooked, but they're produced and sent out, so I'm not sure which meeting that was in specific, but we can double check on that.
Perfect, and that will give me a strong answer to go back to them with, so.
I'll look back a little further. I'm sure you'll see plenty of minutes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so, but, and I appreciate all the cooperation, JC, that Marine Products Board had. Disgustingly enough, this process cost about $110,000. So it was industry came up with the percentage of it to get us going, the Seafood Council, and then Marine Products Board came on board, so.
I'll just
JC.
make one mention, from the Marine Products Board, we worked with Virginia Tech, and we just recently concluded an economic impact study, which showed that the seafood industry is worth about $1.1 billion to the state of Virginia. So it's a very important industry, and everybody recognizes that, how important it is, and I guess more that shows that how this committee and how the Marine Products Board, how we work and how we do that kind of stuff. So I think everybody should be grateful for that.
Thank you. Anything else, JC? I mean, Andrew.
No, I will just add, I think oysters and clams were 1 and 2 on that economic analysis.
They
there,
are.
so,
Oysters still number one.
Yep. So now that Adam's coming over from the finfish department, we got a little more.
He's way down.
Leave the bunkers and come on to the oysters.
Just one species, right?
That's right, and it doesn't move.
That's right. That's what everyone tells me. It's one species that doesn't swim.
That's exactly.
That it, you think?
Unless there's any agenda items, I'll try to get together with the chair and staff and try to get a meeting planned Valentine's Day or something.
Sure.
Sometime middle of February. Try to get it before the commission meeting there and enough time for staff to come with recommendations. I would like to try to get the replenishment plan at least marginally approved there. Should have something formulated there. It's and get going with that. So
All right. Well,
look out for it. A save the date email coming soon. Yeah.
before we close, I would just like to thank the watermen for coming out here this morning and this evening. It's very important for us to hear your voice. And all those here that participate in the meeting, we appreciate you being here. Law enforcement, thank you. And for all the members that are here, I'm proud of you guys. You guys and ladies do a great job, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, on that note, I'd like to recognize the passing of Waterman Roger Parks here in the past week. He was a longtime member of this committee, and he did a lot of what Corey did today, spending his own time and he was here when things weren't very rosy. It wasn't such a good time, so he passed this past weekend. So.
All right. With nothing else, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.